Smart 24, driving business.
Good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Smart 24 TV and we do drive your business. My name is Anthony Sabale and I am your host, and this is The Point. And of course, we are here to discuss policy and analyze the current policies and see if we can suggest changes that can have a positive impact on the citizen, on business and on the economy as a whole here in Uganda, but also within the East African boundaries. Now, when we talk about public procurement here in Uganda, it has taken center stage. It's a discussion that many people have actually got to pay more attention to in the recent past. And today we are going to be discussing more about the role of women and how women can be able to participate in public procurement and be able to take hold of the benefits that come with it and also contribute to the growth of the economy here in Uganda, but also within East Africa. And joining me on set tonight to discuss the topic is none other than Miss Charity Komjirizi, who is from the Africa Freedom Information Center. And we are also glad to have Mr. Ronald Tumuhaire, who is also the manager of local content at the Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Authority Uganda, and they are in charge of public procurement here in Uganda and framing the policies and also getting to follow up with the regulations in public procurement. You're very, very welcome.
Thank you, Anthony, and we are glad to be here. For the viewers out there, we are privileged to be before you. And as Anthony has introduced myself, I'm Ronald Tumuhaire, and I work at PPDA, which is the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority, and I work there as manager local content.
Yeah, well, interesting. Ms. Charity, most welcome.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening, viewers. I'm glad to be here this evening and lucky to be joined by Ronnie from PPDA, Manager Local Content. Please take note, Manager Local Content. We shall talk more about that. And viewers, please listen in. I personally work with the Africa Freedom of Information Center as the Monitoring and Evaluation Coordinator.
Wow, interesting. Very, very warm welcome. Just to get our conversation started.
Sure.
When we talk about public procurement, definitely someone could get to know about government purchasing either goods or services or any form of works. But from the PPDA perspective, how would you define public procurement?
Yes, public procurement from the PPDA angle, I may not want to really bother the viewer with a legalistic definition, but the PPDA Act under Section 3 provides for the definition of public procurement. In simpler terms, it is buying of whatever government requires, and government requires different things. It can require medicines, it can require classroom blocks, it can require roads, it can require many things, you know, apparel or uniforms, stationaries, mention it. So public procurement is simply the acquisition of whatever government requires using public resources. These public resources are what we call the taxes that myself and you and the viewers and every other Ugandan collects through submitting to URA, and it is that money that government uses to buy, and that is what actually we underline. That is what makes it public procurement, because we are using public funds to buy the things that government needs to use to deliver services to the wananchi, to the common man, to the Ugandan, to the sick Ugandans in hospitals, to the Ugandans there that want passports to travel, and all these things that government uses to actually extend services to the common Ugandan. So that is simply public procurement.
Ms. Charity, tell us about the African Freedom Information Center. This is a civil society organization or NGO that currently has been in place for quite some time now, one of the oldest in place since time memorial. But what is your mandate, and how do you, track your, maybe the activities of government, and how do you advise citizens, and how do you help contribute to the well-being of the citizen here in Uganda?
Okay, thank you, Anthony. AFIC, or Africa Freedom of Information Center, is the largest continental network organization that promotes the right of access to information, transparency, and accountability. At our AFIC, our mandate is to ensure that citizens on the African continent enjoy their right of access to public information. What does that mean? Is that every citizen, I always give an example of my mother or grandmother down there in the village in Isinjiro, should be able to get information. If I use an example of Ronald's authority, PPDA, they should be able to get information about the different contracts or the different projects or the different commodities that through PPDA the government plans to buy. So this information should be trickled down to this individual at the deepest level of this country, and they should be able to use the information to better themselves. They should use the information to tap into opportunities. They should use information for their own security. They should use also information to hold the government accountable as a citizen. So that is the right of access to information, the kind that we promote. Then when it comes to transparency and accountability, is as taxpayers, we care about the taxpayers' money. So as government engages into public procurement, from record on statistics, we see that government spends over 60% of its annual budget through public procurement, meaning that most of the money is actually into the buying that the government does. I'll call it the buying because they don't sell. So the buying that government does. So if government actually buys, whom does it buy from? Who provides the services? So at AFIC, we promote citizens' participation to ensure that they hold government to be transparent by sharing all the information in all sectors, and government should be accountable.
Oh, interesting. And I love the words transparency and accountability. I know Ugandans have these at the tip of their fingers when it comes to government matters. But getting back to you, Mr. Ronald.
Yes.
AFIC here is saying that there must be information out there about how government is spending and how government is utilizing funds, because these are public funds.
Yes.
And she mentioned also clearly that 60% of the national cake goes to procurement. So we are talking about a very sensitive area here that not only affects government spending or service delivery, but all parts, other various parts of the economy and how government actually works.
Yeah.
Tell us, why should a citizen be interested in the dialogue of public procurement? Because I know some people don't care whatsoever. They have lost hope, and they don't know that actually this is where the gist lies when it comes to service delivery and economic growth. What do you think public procurement adds as benefits, not only to the government being able to purchase, but to individuals in society?
Yes, very interesting debate here. And in fact, when we are talking about access to information, this is a right that actually stems from our constitution, and citizens have a right to information, especially on government affairs and things that concern them. And as an authority, PPDA, we also subscribe to the provisions of our constitution as a country, and so do all other government institutions. And when we are talking about procurement, like Charity has clearly indicated that over 60% of the national budget, currently the national budget is in trillions, about 48. So 60% of that actually is spent through buying things that government requires. And this definitely then makes procurement a very interesting area and a very attractive field for various people. It actually brings many people together. When you're talking public procurement, you will find the business people interested, you will find entrepreneurs interested, you will find politicians, you will find government officials, civil society, and it's a rock bed of many things. There's a lot happening when a government institution is given a budget to procure. You'll find like many stakeholders gathering around, and what it is that they want to do is to partake of that kamani, if I must use that language. You know, Ugandans understand the language of kamani very much. So people want to partake of that resource. You know, it is like a delicious meal served in a family. Everyone wants to gather around the table and actually take a piece of it. So this is what happens in procurement, and you cannot blame anyone, because through public procurement, government demonstrates its intentions. If government's intentions is or are in roads, you'll find that there is a lot of investment in the road sector. If government's interests are in security, you'll find that the security organs have a huge procurement budget. If it's in legislation, wherever the aspirations of government are, is where they are going to put the money. And that is where we are actually going to go procure things that government thinks are very relevant. In the past, government has been putting emphasis on infrastructure development, and there has been actually a lot of resources, finances directed towards infrastructure growth. And we see that in the last about 10 years, Uganda has actually grown in terms of the road network, in terms of the energy sector, and a lot of infrastructure has actually come into place because government's aspirations are in a well-connected system and network. And because of that, to your question, why the citizens should be very interested in this dialogue. Very simple. If you need to partake of the national interests, because we are all Ugandans, you know, as a Ugandan, I want to see to it that government is investing in the things I'm interested in. If it's about my health as a Ugandan, if it's about my security, if it's about my business, and as we are going to divulge in the debate, if it's about women mainstreaming, we want to see that the resources are actually put there, and then above all, the resources are utilized in line with the basic principles of public procurement. The basic principles of public procurement are that there should be transparency when government agencies are spending the money. For your information, Anthony and the viewers out there, government has over 3 180 institutions that are accorded a budget. Each of them has a budget. And so they spend that budget through a procurement budget, through their salaries that they give to their staff. And the common man, the Ugandan, at the grassroots, at those different government entities, wherever they are, the district local governments, the municipal councils, the cities, the district hospitals, the ministries, the authorities. Someone wants to exactly be able to position themselves and make sure that they are in the line of the opportunities from these institutions. So the basic principles on transparency, on accountability, on fairness, on ensuring that business is awarded competitively and not awarded through friends or to friends and relatives and in-laws. You know, you want to have a procurement system that gives you value in terms of efficiency. We want to see a road constructed. If it's in 6 months, let it be completed in 6 months, so that the common Ugandan is able to benefit. And again, to marry this with what Charity is talking about in terms of access to information. If the common Ugandan does not take interest, they will not know that some of these rights are enshrined in our laws, that procurement should be done transparently with at most non-discrimination and fairness. So they will not demand for their rights. If I am a Ugandan down there in, let's say, Isinjiro or in Rakai, and I am a businessman, I may be taken for a ride, especially by these government institutions, if I do not know how to demand for certain rights that are provided for clearly in our laws.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow, interesting, Mr. Ronald. But Madam Charity, Mr. Ronald there makes a point that they make an effort to be transparent and accountable. But according to statistics also, just a couple of years ago, there was a trace that at least 33% women are in actual entrepreneurship here in Uganda. And these women came up to say that they are not involved in the procurement, the public procurement. They don't have, there are no policies in place. There were no policies in place then, and I'm talking about between 2018 2020. There were no policies in place then to favor women to be able to participate in public procurement. But also later on, when the policies were amended, there were some things that remained stringent, such as the measures, the requirements to be able to be part of the procurement team, and so on and so forth, that still present a barrier, right? And then you as the information center, there's information gap, like he has mentioned, the knowledge. People still don't know that they could actually do businesses and they supply to government, right? How can we bridge this gap, and what should be changed? Where is the problem? Is it the problem of the citizen? Is it the problem of the government to ensure that we have participation, especially the vulnerable groups such as women?
Okay, what a wonderful question. So there's a problem, true. Recently, AFIC with its partners in Kenya, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and the 5 countries inclusive Uganda, we set out to ask a related question. We're asking ourselves that when you look at the United Nations SDG theme of leaving no one behind, yes, we expect that women, the youth, people with disabilities should be in this thing, if I may use that language. But in what thing? So if governments are spending over 60% of their budgets through public procurement, so we looked at this should be a great opportunity where these special groups should be participating. So we set out to do a study that was assessing the barriers and solutions that were hindering women-led businesses in participating in public procurement. We did this in Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And to our surprise is that yes, there are so many barriers, there are also so many opportunities, but the barriers are there, but even the opportunities are there, but they're also not known. And from our findings, we divided them into three sections. One being political, they are political or policy, not political, policy barriers, and others are structural or operational, and the other barriers are social and cultural norms. Under the policy barriers, we found that from the countries that we are assessing, including Uganda, maybe Ronald will talk more about this, Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania have gone ahead to actually promote women's participation in public procurement by putting specific or special reservation schemes. And here in Uganda, we have a 30% reservation scheme that is for women, youth, and people with disabilities to participate in public procurement. Meaning, for every procuring entity should reserve 30% of its procurements for those vulnerable groups. That's what it means literally. The same is in Kenya, the same is in Tanzania. And then for the other countries, Ethiopia and Rwanda, they didn't have any specific law in place. However, the law that is in place in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania is still not sufficient. It is very weak in some way. Yes, it says reserve 30% for the special groups, but they don't have specific definitions. For example, when they talk about women-led businesses, there is no specific definition of the women groups that they are talking about. When they talk about the women-owned businesses, women-led businesses.
Which business?
You can't. We go by the general dictionary definition or World Bank definition of whereby maybe 50% should be owned or managed by a woman. So that is a loophole in the reservation scheme.
We are going to take a very short break, Madam Charity, right there as we get deeper in the discussion. Well, we are talking public procurement and especially focusing on the participation of vulnerable groups. And today we are talking women. We are still in the Women's Month, so we are still celebrating women and addressing issues that affect them. Now, we will kick off right there from the amendments that have been made in the PPDA Act to see that we have more participation. This has been, of course, with the reservation scheme, like Ms. Charity mentioned, with 30% of procurement now being done from these groups. But where is the problem? Because even after the amendment, we still have a challenge with less women participating in public procurement. My name is Anthony. We return shortly. Stay with us.